That's a very important issue. I mean, I would like to discuss that more. You know, you talk about belonging, participation. There'll be many people who'll be looking at this video and thinking, well, what are the small things that I can do? You talk about light bulbs. These things are important. I mean, could you speak a bit more about what could the general people do to participate?
I think it all starts, it seems like an abstract thing. It starts with the way you look at the world. It starts with your consciousness. Once you have this consciousness of wholeness, you start finding out what you do. Because you can always ask yourself this question, and which will then give you the answers. Ask yourself the question, is what I am doing in my work, in my professional life, in my private life, is the way I'm living compatible, positive, in the sphere of life, in the network of life, or is it something that's damaging? Mm-hmm. Do I take the resources that other people have a right to as well? Do I, for example, do I eat in a way that permits other people to eat the same way? Mm-hmm. We know very well that the kind of diet that the Western civilization typically has in the Western world, in America and in Western Europe, is perhaps a billion and a half people could live like that. There's just not enough feed, for example, to feed all the cows, if you're going to slaughter them, and the pigs at this rate. There's not enough energy to create all the fertilizers, to work all the lands. Eating more naturally is one of the things. Living more naturally, a little bit, trying to make use of the energy sources, trying to save what we can, but making the right choices. Mm-hmm. We have everything before us. We have all the possibilities. We can live practically in a self-contained way. Very difficult, of course, in the big cities. But even there, we can clothe, we can dress ourselves, we can eat, we can choose the kind of work that we do, which is compatible, which is a positive contribution. Mm-hmm. You know, the great philosopher Immanuel Kant said, always ask yourself the categorical imperative. Is what you are doing, can it be a universal law, a universal maxim? Could other people do it as well, you know? If we ask ourselves this question, I think we'll be able to find that many of the things that we are doing is not tenable, not sustainable, because other people cannot do it, and there is an increasing gap then, an increasing stress in the world. So we have to learn to live in a sustainable way, live in a way in which everybody can live, act in a way. That, to me, is the morality. Mm-hmm. Live in a way that all people could live.
Mm-hmm. So you're encouraging a mindfulness, a self-reflexive mindfulness.
Reflect on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You see, the mark of intelligence, is often said, is to be able to know what you're doing and to learn and to find out the consequences, to be able to keep account of what happens if you do this or if you do that. Now that's an intelligence, and this level that very few other species have. Not at this level, none of them have it, but for example, higher apes are able to know some of the consequences of their actions. They did tests, you know, when by getting hold of food, for example, in a lab, and which creates pain or takes away the food from another chimp, you know, then the chimps are altruistic in the sense they even willing to forego their own food. They can know some effect, to some extent, the results of their own actions. But we alone have the capacity to find out and to think ahead what it is that we are doing, what does it do to others, what does it do to the planet. We have become a global species, and these are questions we have to ask. So ultimately, we have to be mindful of ourselves as a part of the web of life.
In education, Ervin, I'd like to ask you, how do you feel education can contribute to the world shift?
Well, education is traditionally handing down the knowledge that our elders have had, and conserving the values also. Education is intrinsically conservative, and that is fine. when the world is stable, when one generation can hand it down to the next generation because it still remains important and valuable. But what happens when the world is changing? What happens when the wisdom of our forefathers may need to be adapted to live wisely today? You know, then you have to innovate. It's not enough just to educate in the knowledge, in the values, in the beliefs that our forefathers or the previous generation have had. Then education must be a trigger, a catalyst, must be a challenge to learn. Not to teach, but to learn. That, I think, is a great task for education, so that we can learn as a conscious, positive being, a factor of life that contributes to the shift in which we are living. Education could do that, but it's a different concept. It's not teaching people, just learn this, you must know this, but enable people to find out for themselves.
So what legacy should we be handing on to the next generation, to the generations to come?
The legacy is that we have been wise enough to permit change. The legacy to help people create the world that they want to live in. It's not a legacy of do the same that I've been doing. It's a legacy, look around yourself, find out the way you want to live, to find out what kind of world you want, and then do it. We are living in a world of change. We have not used this concept, but let me just mention this, even though it comes from the sciences, but it's so important today, the concept of non-linearity. You know, linear change, little by little, bit by bit, step by step. And this is a beautiful concept when the world is stable. You do a little bit more, invest a little bit more, you get a little bit more products. You build a little more highway miles, you build some more houses, everything is the same, only it gets a little bit more and bigger and perhaps better year by year. When you get to this critical point where we are now, it doesn't go like that anymore. Then you have a shift. That's a whole notion of a shift. That is a change. It's a break with the past and something new is starting. Not a disregard of the past, because as Santayana said, those who disregard the past will be obliged to repeat it. But learning from the past, learning that there are these critical non-linear points where we've got to innovate. We've got to go along with the famous saying by Einstein, who said that you can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking where the problem was created. Learn new thinking. And only we can do this. You can't be taught new thinking. We have to develop it ourselves, but we can be helped. Our legacy is to help people today to engage in new thinking of their own.
So Ervin, what would be your message to the younger generation, the younger people, if you could say something to them now?
Be happy that you live today. Not just be happy, just to shut your eyes and sit around and contemplate your navel. That's all fine, but it's not enough. We are very fortunate. You are very fortunate, living at a time when you can possibly be the first generation in history, in human history, that can decide whether it's the last generation of an age or a first generation of a new age. At this turning point, at this critical turning. And that is a marvelous opportunity to create the future for life on Earth. I know these are very big terms, very big words, but we are at a point in our history where we have to create a future. We cannot simply trust that everything is going to go on by itself and that everything will go on the way it has been going, or that somebody else will take care of it. Because if everybody would think somebody else will take care of it, then finally nobody will. And to think that there are some people up on top who know all about it and who will take care of it, I think that's also a fallacy. Very often I'm frightened when I talk to people who are really in governing positions, leading positions. You would think that they know what's happening. They very often don't know what's happening, you know. they are at sea also. They are trying to find a way. If they are honest and they are ethical, they are trying to find a way, a good, positive way forward. Many of them just try to keep their own powers base, you know, intact. But we have got to do it ourselves. My message is, wake up. Don't sleep through this period, which is a period of crisis, but a positive crisis. A crisis can be a very positive thing. Act, be part of the shift, create a shift, move with it, and yourself be the shift.